Kakati-Shah, your host for the Uma Show. Welcome to your one-stop journey of feeling empowered. We want you to be bold, be you, be Uma. We are a platform for change. We build confidence. We empower our members. We are your voice. Today, our theme is diversity and inclusion through storytelling. And I'm so excited to be joined today by Sejal Sehmi, the UK editor of Brown Girl magazine. And Sejal is actually joining us from London. So welcome, Sejal.
Hi, Rita. How are you?
How are you today?
Very good. It's very warm here, enjoying the sunshine.
It's warm here in New York too, so I completely hear you there. So before we get started, are there any shout outs? Anyone watching today you'd like to say hello to?
Hi to my mum and my sisters, basically my inspiration behind everything that I do. So, hi mum, hi girls.
Love that. Well, so we're going to start off with, you've had an amazing life. Tell us a bit about your life's journey. We want to hear about you, where were you born? Where did you grow up? Tell us a bit about that.
So I was born and raised here in southwest London. I've got two younger siblings. Got a bit of a mixed race background. My mother is Gujarati and my dad is Punjabi, so that kind of came with its own kind of ups and downs. It wasn't really fully accepted in in India and kind of within the UK, kind of France a little bit. And I was lucky enough to be raised in a town which in itself is very diverse. In fact, I've seen it kind of grown into a very multicultural town. And I went up to university to do business IT. And so technology kind of fell into my lap. So I took up I fell into IT consultancy, my career choice. And kind of in between, whilst I had been made redundant, I touched on trying to do a bit of filmmaking, a bit of blogging, mainly around how we look at the institution of marriage. Because as you probably know, probably got other women out there that
absolutely, yeah.
Minority cultures, have a huge focus on getting married at the right time and having. I wanted to question that and explore that.
And that's incredible how you actually came about that. And it really affects all of us, really. And I think everyone watching here today will actually resonate with that somehow. So just tell us about your upbringing, really, and how you think that impacted or affected, really, your career choices later on.
I think my parents have always been very supportive in whichever path that I wanted to take. However, because I think I was the firstborn here, academically, what was considered suitable is I suppose what I kind of ended up following. I always had an art set in literature and performing arts. I was always very good at literature. At the time, there were limited options as to where I could go, and I think that kind of made my parents feel a bit nervous. Where something like with business IT or in a science field or accountancy field, it's a little bit more, or it's deemed to be secure. Having said that, though, when they started to realise my passion for writing, and I was actually writing for magazines, they were in that path as well. And they said they've openly said, had things had been different back then, had I had more options and more, I think, more understanding. Their parents who have moved over here, everything is quite new to them. They're understanding the way of living, education, the working culture. It's all kind of very new for them. Whereas I think that my mum's sister-in-laws who have studied here, their mindsets are changing. So you've got my cousins who are kind of doing completely out of the box career choices. And they've always been really, really supportive in anything that I've done.
Absolutely. And I completely resonate with that. I mean, with me as well, and we've chatted about this before, I started, my career in finance. Before that was another life where I studied medicine. Exactly the same thing, where my parents, let's say, gently guided me towards that path because that was their background, coming from a doctor medical background, and they came from Assam. And same kind of thing with your parents. They came in, it was that generation. They brought their views and their perceptions of what they thought would be a good career for their their offspring later on. So I ended up studying that, and it wasn't the right choice. Finance was the choice for me, and then entrepreneurship, and then healthcare. So kudos for you for recognizing that. And same as you, it's like, my parents got it later on as well. And there've been some conversations that haven't been easy to have. And they've been very emotional and personal, but you need to have that. And that's part of the bonding process. So I think, like you as well, I tell people all the time that to have that, ability to just communicate. And sometimes you need to communicate on the level of you're thinking, okay, I'm speaking to a different generation here. But I have to speak in their, so they understand it from their perspective, because there is a generation gap. We call it that for a reason, and it's about that. So thanks so much for sharing that. And I think it's amazing how you've managed to turn that into something so positive. And then onto your writing now. You are a really, really talented writer. Having read some of your work, it's, oh my gosh, it touches you in the core. You really, really, you have completely got the art of storytelling. So I wanted to ask, I know you've always had a passion for writing. Have you always loved writing? And when did you first realize that you had a talent with words?
When I was ready for my GCSEs, I specifically remember we were studying.
And GCSEs for, just for the rest of the world, are just sort of examinations you do around between the ages of 14 to 16.
So we were studying Macbeth. I absolutely loved it. And at the time, I was having English tuition for language and for literature. And I got into, the tutor used to give me these essay questions, and I used to just turn them around. I just, I'll stay up till late doing them. And he actually said to my mum, I don't really think she needs any more tutoring. I think she's just kind of doing it for the love of it. And I never really thought about it afterwards until completely by accident when I was made redundant. And I was made redundant at the time when my younger sister was getting married. In our family, it's not a big deal who gets married first. It doesn't really matter.
Right.
So she was in the middle of getting married. I didn't have a job. I'd lost my landlord had sold the apartment, had to move back to my parents' place. So I was kind of in this very lost phase. And it was just then when my filmmaker friend had said, let's just do a crowdfunding page. Let's go to India, camera in our hand, and let's document, how people in India actually look at the Institute of Marriage and why their pressure is there and what they're doing about it. So in that time and in the lead up to it, he said, why don't you kind of blog your feelings and what you think? And my friend had given me this notebook before I went to India. She said, just write whatever you feel. Yeah. So just before I traveled to India, I wrote the first blog, and I tried to be witty and funny, and like it's another Friday night. I'm here in my pajamas watching traditional English soap opera, Coronation Street, Dateless again, and it got quite a few. It pulled in quite a lot of interest to the extent where BBC Network actually asked me to come in to their show.
It's incredible.
While we were filming in India, I kept on writing everything that kind of came to mind. I just kept putting it down on paper, putting it out there on a blog spot. And it's when Asiana magazine had approached me and they said they wanted to run a little mini series on my journey in India. And it kind of started from there, and also started my journey with Brown Girl magazine. It was kind of like little bits and pieces I was submitting. I was like, oh, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? What do you think about that? And that's how it kind of like, it grew from there.
Blossoms, really. Yeah. No, I love that. And because your pieces, like I said, it just really, really resonate. And you can tell you're immersing your personal life journey in your words, what you experience. And people can feel what you see when you wake up in the morning. People can see that sip of coffee, that you're drinking it. People can feel that. And that's something that's not easy to do. And I just love that. So thanks so much for sharing that. So now you mentioned obviously Brown Girl magazine. Tell us a little bit about the publication, and then how you started getting involved with Brown Girl magazine and now subsequently are the UK editor.
So Brown Girl magazine was founded in 2008. And essentially what it was a online publication to really create a safe space for the South Asian diaspora to kind of share their feelings, their experiences. There are so many people across the world who kind of go through these cross-cultural issues, and they wanted somewhere to share that. So it grew from there, and I'd heard about them and I'd read about them, and they cover, not just cross-cultural differences, but, entertainment, relationships, politics. And I started talking to them on Twitter, and I had gone to see this play in South Bank based on the Delhi gang rape that happened, and it really moved me. So I wrote a review, and they liked what I did, and so we kept going back and forth. I thankfully managed to get a job back into the technology sector because, you know, girls got to eat, pay a mortgage and whatnot. So, but what came out of that was I was able to go to New York quite a lot for work, and I ended up meeting the team there. And we got to talking, and she said, Trisha, the now CEO, had said to me, you know, how do you feel about actually running the team and building up your own kind of UK footprint? So whichever girls that we had there, I kind of brought them all under one umbrella, and then I went out kind of hunting for more. My take on it was, because I'm slightly older than the average brown girl reader stroke writer, I wanted to look at it as, I don't want to criticize everything about being South Asian. I want us to start embracing the wonderfulness of it, because to put something out there on a personal level, as you say, it's very, very difficult. And trust me, I got a lot of flack. You know, it's one thing getting it from being trolled or from people that you don't know and hate threats and stuff. But when you start to share things on a much more personal level, and you have your own family and friends who turn around and say, why are you putting your dirty laundry out there? It's really, you know, you've really got to have a bit of thick skin there, because for all of those people who are hating on you, there's going to be at least one or two people who are going to read that and think, wow, that does resonate. And we built it up from there. So I've got about 7 girls in my team at the moment. And from that, what I've managed to do is use that experience to go on to, we did a little exhibition for TEDx UCL women at King's College, where we shared, you know, stories of representing disrupt. What does disrupt mean?
I remember that, yeah.
We showcased at the at UK's first ever Asian Women Festival in Birmingham. We've collaborated with yourself a number of times. And kind of, we've been approached by different organisations here, like in the UK, to say, let's collaborate, let's, you know, put different synergies together. And some of these girls in my team, I mean, the stories that they come out with, their ideas and their pitches, and I think to myself, wow, I wish I had that courage when I was your age. I wish I was that street smart at 25. The level of knowledge around politics and how they look at it, the brilliant kind of the subjective views that they take on it as well. So yeah, I'm really excited about where we're going.
Yeah, really well. So, and I think that's part of the exciting part of it, because that your different writers, they have their voices, and voices come out. And I think that's, you know, it's almost like power to the people. And that's what part of what you're fighting against is that people have these voices, and there are there are a lot of judgmental people in our community, you know, very diplomatically said, but I can't think of any other words. And I think that's what it comes across. You are going to get no's, you are going to get questions, you are going to get people pointing at you all the time. But these are our voices. These are the voices of the readers, voices of the authors from real life experiences. And the fact that you are strong enough, you and your entire team of writers are strong enough to actually come out with that. And we've done our research. This is not just, you know, coming up with a topic just because. This is something that affects people's lives. It affects, you know, X number. It's, you know, the majority in this place or that place. This is what people are going through, and this is what they're saying, but their voice has been previously sort of shushed or, you know, turned down, and you're bringing those voices up. And I think that is incredible. So very timely today, I guess, you know, the theme of diversity and inclusion, and that is exactly what Brown Girl Magazine stands for. You are that voice for diversity and inclusion. So, being obviously the UK editor, you would come across different themes, I guess, to portray and think about. How do you choose, I guess, what theme to prioritize, or what are you going to concentrate on next? I mean, I guess if you have a favorite as well, what's your favorite, whether it's in the UK or in, you know, in one of the US themes, or in India, actually, if you have a special theme? I
don't have a specific favorite. I think that some of the things that I think have touched me when people come to me with real personal stories. This, what guest blogger had written about, she had a couple of miscarriages, and she said that, you know, people are focusing on us, but she said, what about my husband? He's lost as well, and why aren't we openly talking about it? Why do you think that just suddenly filling in the gap with another baby, that will take that grief away, which I think is very powerful. I think that I also think that some of the politics as well. You know, the amount of knowledge that these girls have is amazing. And also it gets me thinking about, especially with the Black Lives Matter that is, you know, so prevalent right now. It's brought up so many debates. It's really kind of elevated people's feelings about how inclusive actually are we. And yes, whilst we stand side by side kind of with our Black friends and family to say your lives do matter, our lives matter, everybody's lives matter, some of the stories that the girls have kind of put across is like, well, how are we looking at it internally? You know, in the Caribbean community, this is something that I didn't even know about. I'm learning. We had Zira wrote about, she's in the Caribbean, but she said, what about the racism that's that we portray against our African Caribbean counterparts, you know? And what about this other guest blogger had written in about, well, I'm from East Africa, so how can I be how can I be racist? But actually, we are, you know, in kind of our little day-to-day nuances and how we treat people and how we, that kind of thinking hasn't gone away. And I like pieces that really kind of question, that it forces me to question my own beliefs and have I educated myself enough? Those things I really kind of, I get really challenged by. They really excite me.
Yeah, absolutely. And you just hit the nail on the head. I think, you know, this whole movement has actually asked us, all of us, to look into ourselves, really. You know, obviously, you know, from my parents' generation and currently, you know, there is racism in India amongst different communities, amongst people that speak different languages. You know, my parents are from Assam. You know, we're on the northeast of India. And, you know, I don't have to tell you, there's so many different forms of people pointing fingers and about your appearance, about your voice. Everything under the radar gets questioned. That is racism. So every single community has it. And I think, to your point, and this is what I've certainly found the messaging is in Brown Girl magazine, is that you're not just highlighting and pinpointing where people have previously brushed things under the rug. You're sort of asking them to question it, sort of question their own beliefs. And I think ultimately it comes from your own community, your own culture, your own upbringing. And, you know, you can't change certain things. You grew up a certain way, you hold your knife and fork in a certain way, whatever it is, that's part of who you are. But don't judge somebody else for doing it a different way they were brought up. And I think that's part of it. We are all judgmental in different ways. We all have unconscious biases. But this is all about educating ourselves and how we accept somebody else. You know, when people talk right now about allyship and predominantly focused on the white community, I think it needs to be focused on all of us, because we all have different views in ourselves. Allyship is just understanding and educating ourselves and making the effort to understand and take a step back and listen when somebody speaks before just passing judgment straight away. And that's certainly a messaging that I've heard from you several times. And I think that's part of the reason we bond so well, but also from Brown Girl magazine as well. So amazing. So how do you actually select themes then from when you have your editor's hat on?
I always try and keep my eyes and ears open about what's going on. I mean, I'm quite fortunate that the girls in my team have always got ideas. They're always like, oh, I want to talk about this. I want to talk about that. You know, I always kind of like, what's your story? You know, what's it so different? I've had somebody approach me. I'm quite excited to be running this story about. She talks about having, you know, she's bilingual, but she said, you can't understand my mum, but guess what, nor can I. You know, like, even though we speak language, the confusion of trying to balance between the two languages, the frustration that builds out. And I'm like, wow, that's so interesting. I never thought of it. I never thought of it like that, you know. So I'm always about what's going on, what's out there. I always talk to the girls, you know, issues that they think. And I think that I don't think there's any kind of specific kind of method. I think that I always say to the girls, like, instead of coming like with a whole blog, just give me a title as to, like, why should I read this story? You know, like, why should I read it? What's going to make a good read? So, like, you know, we get like a lot of requests for like book reviews and stuff, which is great. But I want to know what's going on inside the writer's head, because I'm a writer myself. And I still do write for other publications as well in my own time. So I want to know what's your thinking behind it. You know, how do you want us? When I put something down on paper, I know how I see it, but how is it going to be viewed by another reader? How do you want them to see it? What do you want them to take out of it? So I just think it's, and not just in our, you know, not just in the UK, but also I think that for example, there are so many things that are happening in the UK that maybe the rest of the world don't know about. So a couple of years ago, you know, there was the first prosecution for an alleged forced marriage accusation, and that was put into place. And these are, and you know, like the whole kind of what do you call it, honor killings and so forth. There's a lot of that happening. I don't. It may well be also happening in the US. I just haven't read enough material. Kind of, not that I should be, but in terms of, you know, interesting stories about things are changing. You know, like the positive. And like, for example, you know, that we're talking about like Black Lives Matter. I've been watching like documentaries about racism within the armed forces, police force as well. And so you kind of start getting ideas from that, like, hey, is there anybody that we can talk to, we can run this by? But more importantly, I think I look at it as if we've identified like something, but what I like to see is we're in 2020 now, for every kind of cross-cultural issue, whatever issue we come across, I want to see, what are we doing about it? How are we turning that around? What difference are we making to people? And writing can do that. Writing has a really powerful impact.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for sharing that, and completely agree with you on that one. So just sort of turning back onto the storytelling mode for a second, and just journalism as a whole. Now, people from certain backgrounds, our backgrounds, you know, from the South Asian background, don't pick journalism as a career choice. Usually there are journalists out there, but it's not normally picked. You know, they are usually from their parents or whatnot for various reasons are asked to kind of pursue other forms. What would you tell our viewers today, who I'm sure there'd be some budding writers, budding storytellers, budding journalists out there? How would you tell them about sort of keeping up the writing and sort of motivate them to kind of carry on doing this? I mean, one point I remember you saying was that even though you have a technical background, a technology background, you still write. So that's what I picked up. You can still do it as a hobby. It's not one or the other, is it? So I'd love to hear from you what your advice is.
My advice would be, obviously, you know, if you do have the opportunity to take up the as a degree or, you know, some form of diploma, do it, because it can open up so many doors for you. I used to go to a lot of the like Guardian like master classes they hold, you know, like weekend workshops and whatnot. I'm quite proud to see how many amazing South Asian journalists are out there in mainstream media. I have to say, there's some absolutely incredible writers, and I see their faces and I'm like, wow, this is just brilliant. And Rita Sharma from the BBC is one of them, and she's made some brilliant documentaries as well. You know, we're in a time now that had I kind of had that approach in the 90s, it would have been different. The difficulty now is that print media is dying because everything's available online. So my advice would be, like, I always, you know, keep writing. I think that you've got people of this generation have so many options. You've got WordPress. So I still have a WordPress site where I keep all of my work on there. Even if it doesn't get published somewhere, I'll put it on my website, you know, put it up on WordPress. And because, you know, your story is your own. If you want to pitch somewhere, I've pitched to the Independent, who I wrote for last year. I went to Independent last year. I've just recently written for Net Doctor, who are part of the Hearst group, and I'll be published in Red Magazine, which will be coming out next week as well. And these magazines and newspapers get hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pictures every day. Filter it through like that. Just think about what it is, the key thing that you want to get across. So an example, like last year when I pitched to the Independent, it was following on from the outrage after the R. Kelly and Michael Jackson allegations.
Remember that, yeah.
So my pitch to the Independent was, you know, why, as a hardcore fan, I stopped defending them. As an editor, why I stopped defending them, and I kind of gave them 2 lines about, you know, I felt a sense of responsibility now because I'm an editor myself, and they loved that, and they picked up on that. That got me so much. And with Hearst Group, I wrote about something a little bit more personal, about how I lost my best friend to COVID, so and I had to deal with that grief in isolation, and how I kind of overcame that, and the inequalities that COVID-19 has statistically, it's been proven in statistics. And so they ran with that. So you never know. It's about when you storytell, it's like, what is the main point that you want to get across? Why should the read, you know, who is it going to resonate with? I keep a book, and I every day I write something in there, even if it's is it like a Dear Diary moment, just something. Yeah. Somewhere along the line, it will come to you. The Independent was the last proper thing that I'd written, and I'd gone for over a year without doing anything for myself. And my aunt said to me, the penny will drop, and it did, and it got picked up by Hearst Group, which are massive, and I'm so thankful to them. But I think the most important advice I would say is that even if things don't get published anywhere, I think it is so important to just write for yourself, because what we can't articulate with words, you know, it can't be taken back, but what you put down on paper, you can read back, and you know, you kind of grow from it. You grow from your own words, and I personally find, especially in these challenging times, it's so good for your it's really good for your well-being.
If you have a voice, share it, keep writing. You can do it in quarantine as well. You know, for those people at home right now, you can do it from anywhere, but the important is to keep writing and just put yourself out there. You don't pitch, you don't put yourself out there, and just keep doing it. You know, you are going to get rejections. It happens to everyone, but think about your unique selling point. What is your thread? What is powerful about? What are you passionate about? So I love that. So Sejal, thank you so much. That is all we actually have time for today. So I wanted to thank you again. Big thank you to our guest, Sejal Sehmi, and to our viewers for watching today. Also, we would love to hear from you guys. So as always, please send us questions or comments. Tweet us at Be Bold Be Uma, and follow us on social media at Be Bold Be Uma. Thanks so much for joining on this empowerment journey. We want you all to embrace the inner goddess of go-getting inside all of you. Be bold, be you, be Uma.